Did you know that even senior officials in the White House scold the presidents of Harvard, Penn and MIT? Did you know that the board of directors of the University of Pennsylvania has already held an emergency meeting to consider the firing of the president? It might happen today again. Did you hear how much money donors took away from those institutions due to the presidential testimony in the Senate or the Congress? Did you know that senior people on their campuses have already decided to resign from committees due to the values harbored by the leadership? Did you know that unpleasant things are already being said about the reasons for choosing them as presidents for their positions and about their academic quality as scholars? Yes, the Senate or Congressional testimony scandal is shocking the American public and has already made headlines on television in a way that no university president wants to appear in. Take a listen, as people say these days. This is but an example.
U.S. lawmakers have launched an investigation into the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, and MIT. This is coming from the House Education and Workforce Committee. Republican Elise Stefanik, she announced that they are launching this investigation into what she described as the, quote, pathetic and morally bankrupt testimony earlier this week. Let me read you a line from Stefanik's statement. She wrote, quote, "We will use our full congressional authority to hold these schools accountable for their failure on the global stage." And she noted that this is going to include subpoena power. Now, it should be noted that it was Stefanik's questioning of the university presidents on Tuesday that really sparked all of this controversy. The university presidents, they struggled to answer her questions about whether or not calls for genocide against Jews would violate the university's code of conduct. Listen to one of those exchanges between Stefanik and Penn President Liz McGill.
I am asking, specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision.
Now, that exchange caused so much backlash from donors, from business leaders, politicians, that there were calls for Liz McGill to step down as president of Penn. And just this morning, the University of Pennsylvania's Board of Trustees held an emergency meeting. This was a virtual gathering that was called quite hastily. University spokesperson tells me that this gathering was called at around 2 p.m. yesterday, which was also right around the time that the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, condemned McGill's testimony, called for the Board of Trustees to look into this. So, Boris, we're going to stay on top of what comes out of these meetings at Pennsylvania and these calls from lawmakers for more answers and more accountability for the university leaders.
Indeed, the presidents of Harvard, Penn and MIT are bashed by important people in the White House, and they get hit by the media. Like exhausted boxers, the ground is already moving under their feet. So when will they resign? And if they insist on keeping their seat, then when will they be fired by the board of directors? Because it is probably only a matter of time. What a bummer. Yes, presidents of prestigious universities in America may very soon lose their jobs due to the decisions they made following the October 7th massacre in Israel. Harvard, Penn and MIT presidents are scolded for their moral evasion in their Senate or Congressional testimony, for their fear of shaking the campus with a clear value statement, with moral leadership. Perhaps they also fear the violence of Muslim students, and they fear that the institution would upset the major donors from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates. Now, the response to the massacre in Gaza did not bring great respect to their presidency. In any case, the massacre in Israel is a wake-up call for the presidents of universities all over the United States. In this talk, I will clarify why the testimony of the presidents of Harvard, Penn and MIT in the Senate or the Congress hurt their careers. They are now in purgatory, in the limbo of those awaiting dismissal. It is not because of the things they said or did not say in the last 2 months, or their testimony in the Senate or Congress, and their awkward folding the day after, although these acts are enough to fire them. In other words, I will examine three practical and economic aspects here, which will alarm any board of directors to reconsider their continued employment. So this is what we will do today. I will explain that elite universities are huge corporations sitting on billions of dollars. Therefore, a president who damages the mountain of money will not continue to sit on top of it. B, I will explain that the integration of students into prestigious jobs in the labor market is a major criterion for assessing university success. Therefore, employers' boycott against students studying at Harvard, Penn and MIT, and Berkeley and Stanford is expected to greatly disturb their boards of directors. And C, the quality of the students determines the quality of teaching and the human capital that develops on campus. And since Jewish parents now stop enrolling their children in Harvard and Car, the quality of human capital in these institutions will soon diminish. Think about these 3 points and you will also join many in the board of directors who are now calling on the presidents, resign. Let us start with the money. Elite universities in the United States are rich corporations with large endowments. They have a huge investment portfolio. Here next to me is the value of the portfolio of the 15 richest institutions in the United States, the endowments. The 3 institutions in question are at the top of the table. Harvard with $50 billion, MIT with $24 billion, and Pennsylvania, wretched as it is, with only $20 billion. This was their value during the week before October 7th. It is interesting how much of their value has been eroded by now due to the conduct of the 3 presidents. One of the duties of a president is to take care of increasing the endowment so that the annual budget for expenses can grow as well. For example, at Harvard, the institution is allowed to use up to 5% per year from the endowment, and given an average annual interest rate of 6%, the university's budget is constantly growing thanks to a sound investment policy. But a successful president knows how to get big donors. There were days, for example, when Jeffrey Epstein walked from MIT to Harvard and the dollars poured out of his pocket in buildings and research centers. Khashoggi's killer also followed the same path and also had the same hole in his pocket. Yes, the presidents of academic institutions in the USA knew how to turn a blind eye to matters of values and morals if it benefited them and the institutions economically. But now, with the deliberate turning of a blind eye to anti-Semitism on their campuses, it is no longer helpful to the presidents of Harvard, Penn and MIT to be blind. Donors take their donations and transfer them to other institutions, or they give only a single dollar as contribution. As a university president, you cannot ignore major donors. You cannot be mean to them. It is irresponsible. Look at the mistake of Claudine Gay from Harvard. Listen for a moment to Bill Ackman, who since October 7th has turned his chair as an investor at Pershing Capital to address Harvard's poor ethics. A few weeks ago, he wrote a 3,000-word letter to President Gay in which he showed what she could do according to the institution's procedures, and she did not answer him at all. Listen to him, listen to his slight insult.
I wrote a pretty thoughtful letter that was, I think 25 million people saw it on Twitter. And remarkably, I did not get a response, which to me is a very, very bad and weak approach. Literally no response, no acknowledgement, no, dear Bill, I hear what you're saying, but nothing.
It is basic etiquette to answer, Professor Gay, and there is something blatant about your silence in front of Bill Ackman, because I know that you have personally responded to others. So why ignore Ackman? Does that seem reasonable to you? Polite, tactical? Yes, Professor Gay's audacity to not answer someone who not only has millions of dollars in his pocket, but also millions of Twitter followers is shameful. So here is another why she should resign. The affair between Ackman and Gay will end however it will. But the mountain of money at Harvard, Penn and MIT is now as stable as an avalanche in Switzerland. And since management requires responsibility, the presidents must declare that they are responsible for the landslide and vacate their throne. Second, integration of students in the labor market. Do you see my MIT employee card or visitor card? Well, when I arrived there as a guest during a sabbatical year, 2018, they held a festive meeting for the joining professors in which they presented us with the achievements of the institution. And what was the most important achievement in the eyes of MIT? The integration of graduates into leading companies in the American economy. This is why parents of students agree to pay tuition, because the universities guarantee quality employment for their children post-education. This is a worthwhile investment for parents and also increases the institution's budget. Consider an average annual tuition of $70,000 and 4 years of study, and you have about $300,000 in income from each incoming student. And what makes it possible to collect this amount is the role of matchmakers, which the institutions play between the students and the labor market. And something happened in their matchmaking capacity following the October 7th massacre and the reactions to the Hamas. Employers like Bill Ackman say they will no longer hire anti-Semitic students at their companies. Other CEOs reacted more harshly and said that following the terrible testimony of the presidents of Harvard, Penn and MIT in the Senate or Congress, they will not employ the graduates of these institutions. And now think of any parent in their right mind who intends to transfer $300,000 from their pocket to an academic institution. What sane parent would transfer tuition from their pocket to an institution from which the labor market is disconnected? Do you understand what economic risk is developing here? Do you think an executive committee can ignore this risk just because it likes the incumbent president? This is a business matter, and the president's handling of the business of their universities has caused enormous damage to the connection with employer-labor markets. Mayday, mayday. I'm sure that if you were members of the executive committee, you would also vote for impeachment. This is necessary to bring back donors and employers and trust. Parents of Jewish students changed their children's registration for the next school year immediately. The children were accepted to Harvard, but will eventually study in Texas or Southern California. Because if Harvard and Penn allow anti-Semitism to fester on their campuses, if Jewish students have to hide in the library or in their rooms, if they are attacked or swastikas are painted on their walls, why should they study at these universities? Jewish parents turned to counselors and changed the institution where their children would study next year. Hence, the elitist campuses will become Judenrein, free of Jews. But it is not just the loss of diversity that will hurt the campus. The academic level will also suffer. Jewish professors will also prefer to teach and research at other institutions. And since a lot of quality accompanies them and their students, the executive committee will see with shock how the potential for Nobel Prizes moves out from Harvard and Penn and Berkeley and Stanford to universities with a less prestigious name and with a more modest portfolio. And when the members of the executive committee examine the trajectory of the participation of Jews on their campuses, they will once more reach the same conclusion. The presidents have harmed the public status of their universities, their budget, and their prestige. And I think no executive committee can ignore such a high loss of value and in such a short time. Sometimes a leader must resign from his position due to ministerial responsibility. But in the current situation, it is not the failure of others Harvard, Penn, and MIT presidents should take responsibility for. The failure is theirs. We sat with our jaws dropped in front of the screens and did not understand the emotional disconnect displayed by the three presidents, the mechanics of their answers, and their lack of sincerity or empathy. No failure is theirs, neither in their legal advisor nor in the public relations officers. They were just being them, unscratchable. That is their moral leadership. And there is little doubt that in a self-respecting university, they would have already returned the keys to their office. And it must also be assumed that if they fail in resigning on time next week, someone on the executive board will show them the door. Until next time, I am Professor Gad Yair.